You are listening to Wicked Psychotherapists, a podcast where two psychotherapists show you that taking care of and learning about mental health doesn't have to be wicked hot.
Hi, everyone. This is Tanya.
Hi, this is Erin, and welcome to Wicked Psychotherapists.
Yeah, so we are in spooky month, and we are just going wild with all the movies that are traditionally watched during this season. So we've been talking for a while, doing Practical Magic movie, and we thought this would be
I like the idea to pause the movie.
The movie, yeah, like not just Practical Magic, but also just the movie. So yeah, we thought, there's some good themes to explore in there. It's a fun movie. It's, if you are at all seeing us on video, we've got our little mugs on here. Erin's got her cute little witch mug with the eek bag. It's, her treat bag. It's so cute.
Yeah, cute.
In your pumpkin shirt.
Oh, yeah.
It has Halloween themes. So we're getting into, I did some red and black nails, and I've got some Galatian lug because to me that's witchy.
Wintry, fallish. Yeah.
That's just my thing. And I got my fall background. I'm going to add to again. But so we are in the fall spirit. We hope you are too, if you are joining us. But we wanted to talk about some things that we feel stand out in mental health that can also be applied to the movie or just kind of overall mental wellness. So this movie was made in 1998. And I'm only pointing that out because it is 26 years later, and by now I think most people have seen it. So again, there's going to be spoilers in here. Yeah, that's something I just often want to. I know it's probably assumed, but I'm just going to say that. And also just that this was based off of a book. I actually forgot about this.
Oh,
Practical Magic is it Alice Hoffman? Is she the writer? I think it's Alice Hoffman, and she just has some really fabulous books. I think that kind of talk about subjects of like magic, but also they're very symbolic of real life. And I just kind of
family relationships.
Yeah, I really love how she weaves those themes together. So I think that this is really cool that they made a movie off of this. But yeah, so I mean, it's a really fun cast, right? It's Nicole Kidman, Sandra Bullock, Diane West.
I don't know. They all look so.
They're all very famous.
Yes, because I was going to say the ants looked they looked very familiar. I just couldn't figure out who they were.
Yeah, they've been in a lot of stuff. Stockard Channing, I think Channing Stockard. Stockard Channing. I may be mixing up a few names with Tatum and stuff. I don't know what I'm doing, but
there's a little Magic Mike stuff going on.
Yeah, there's some. Which is a different form of magic. But yeah, there's some really classic actors in here. So, you're getting good stuff. And yeah, Stockard Channing is her name. And she's, been in a lot of different things. There's also the other aunt, Diane, I want to say, is it Weist or I don't think I ever knew how to say her last name.
Diane West.
Yeah, Weist. Sorry, I'm totally mispronouncing that, but you all know who I mean. She's been in a lot of stuff. And obviously Nicole Kidman and Sandra Bullock, they're all very famous. So yeah, so this is it's an interesting movie because it involves like magical elements like spells, witches, maybe being kind of shunned by the town. The two main characters, the sisters, Sally and Jillian, that are played by Sandra Bullock and Nicole Kidman. They end up living with their aunts because their dad died. It was supposed to be from this, like, they're cursed in love. The females are cursed in love in the family. And then the mom dies of a broken heart. So then they go to their aunts, to live with them. And within this town, it's very much known that they're like witches and they're not quote unquote normal. And so they're kind of not really accepted too much for their powers. There's even a scene when they're little, the two sisters, that somebody says something about them being witches and they get into like a physical fight with this kid. I think doesn't Jillian kind of knock him out?
Well, and then she curses chicken pox on him.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah, they kind of use the magic.
Yeah, the chicken pox or measles or something. And then he comes back later on with chicken pox on him.
Yeah, and then the mom's mad and is like, or like kind of scared too. Yeah.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of like right off the bat, we see kind of these like fantastical, like magical elements, but it weaves into a lot of other, I think, symbolically related, like, mental health themes, family relationships, connection, self-care, like abusive relationships. There's a lot of different themes in this.
Yeah. Yeah. And we'll talk about it too. Like, yeah, the sister relationships, the aunt relationships, that how they can almost be like a mother to them too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and we see a really big dichotomy between the two sisters at a young age, right? Like they're very different. Jillian is very kind of like free-spirited and wants to experience love, very much a romantic, and is like, I want to, have somebody just, can't wait to fall in love. And Sally's like,
Mhm.
I'll never fall in love,
Yeah.
kind of thing. Likely because she knows of the, with her
The curse.
parents, kind of what had happened. Yeah. So right off the bat, you see that there's a strong bond between them, but they are very different and how they are. Even their like physical characteristics are very different. Like Sally's very kind of dark haired, dark eyed, and Jillian is very like light haired, blue eyed, and kind of like, curly hair.
Yeah. Wild red hair. And
Yeah. It's really like just kind of a contrast there. So
Mhm.
but they very much, care for each other. You can see that there's like a, big connection there. You can see that the aunts look over them and, watch out for them
Yeah.
and kind of are protecting them in this magic. But then as the sisters get older, what ends up happening is, we see that Jillian, Nicole Kidman's character, sorry, I keep saying that, but I'm just trying to keep it straight myself, that she's like running off to meet boys. She's boy
Yeah.
crazy. And, Sally is kind of more like, reading a book at night kind of
Yeah.
type, or like going to bed early sort
Yeah.
of.
Yeah. Don't leave me. Yeah.
Yeah. And like kind of wants, to just have her sister around. But at one point, Jillian does run off with a boy and, Sally's really upset. But then Sally finds her own person that she falls in love with very unexpectedly and is just like, oh, things are great, has kids, has a family, is very happy. But then the curse hits and
Yeah. And we
unfortunately
find
her
yeah.
husband dies.
Yeah. Then there seems to be a lot of sadness and anger from Sally when she realizes that her aunts kind of created, well, they didn't create him, but they put a spell so that they would meet or connect. But they said they never really believed that Sally would fall in love with him. So they thought that she'd be safe from the curse. They just didn't want her to be alone, which there was a lot of anger from Sally, but you could see because they took this parental role in their nieces. And they were thinking, okay, well, how can we get her out of the house and how can we let her have a life and be happy? So then it's like almost full circle. Then she had to come back and move back with her aunts.
Yeah, that's true. That's a big part of it is that, yeah, the aunts had kind of cast a spell, but thinking like, oh, this won't affect her in this way. And it kind of reminds me of like a family dynamic of somebody trying to help someone out, well meaning, but maybe it turns out to be not the best in the end kind of thing. And kind of encouraging them to go in one direction, knowing there's a possibility you can get hurt. But
Yeah.
I think what the aunts realized is that no matter what you do in life, you can get hurt. And that's kind of like a big theme is that there are themes where there's going to be loss and grief in every relationship. You're not going to be able to be with the same person.
And especially if you're helping somebody and they don't know it. So if you're helping someone in the background and you think you're solving your family member's issue or you're preventing them from having heartache by doing this, you're not really doing a huge service for them, which I think the aunts realized when Sally's husband died.
Yeah, kind of like a little bit of enabling maybe, or like caretaking and kind of saying like, okay, we don't want her to hurt, but maybe they went too far in kind of deciding some of those elements and not consulting her on that and not, kind of realizing she might have not wanted a different direction for herself. But then there's also for Sally, it's also realizing that, and I think that the aunts talked to her about this, like life is about, unfortunately is about loss and grief. Like we're all going to lose people. We're all going to, if you can't kind of hide away from that, and you had that love and unfortunately it's not here right now.
Yeah.
She still has her two children who are kind of miniatures of the sisters. They kind of have the same contrasting elements and contrasting
the hair color and
too.
The dark hair and the red hair and one's more serious, one's more adventurous.
One has like kind of more of a talent for spells and the other one doesn't, which was kind of the way it was. Like Sally I think was more talented with spells, but didn't really want to use it.
Right.
Yeah. And that's another thing, is that element of like Sally kind of turned away from, she didn't want that kind of, I think, intuitive sense, or kind of that, whatever that magical, kind of familial characteristic that's in their family, like, that thing that they call spells, and they do this. It's very much kind of saying like, this is a part of your, your family, like your family history. And she didn't really want that. She kind of wanted to be quote unquote normal. Like she just kind of wanted to live like a normal, have a husband and kids, and that's it. And she was very angry that, I think that she knew she had that talent, and she had to kind of suppress it a little bit.
Yeah, it's almost like cultural. So she didn't want to, like if we're thinking like not in the movie too, like a lot of times people culturally, they don't want to always follow what the past generation has done. Just because the past generation has done it, it's like, I want to create my own route. I want to be able to figure out my own path. But sometimes we do have to weave back to some of our cultures and some of our family's beliefs, because sometimes that's, I don't want to say it's the best, but sometimes that's just what we know as a family unit too.
Yeah. I think that's a good point. Like it's kind of like generational trauma, like saying, I don't want this, but there's still elements that I do want to pass on that maybe I think are important to, keep within myself and keep with my family. And saying like, it doesn't have to be an all or nothing thing. Like I think Sally was trying to bury it, and instead it's kind of like accepting it and knowing that you can use it, but you don't have to do this in the same way. It doesn't have to turn out the same way. And you can kind of make your own kind of traditions and your own cultures, but like still incorporate some of those other things. It doesn't have to be something to run from.
Yeah. And just even too, how Sally, when she was walking, I was just thinking about how when she was walking onto the path to move back into with her aunts, because like it was so different than when her and Jillian first went, because they were very much like, the aunts were like, okay, we're going to have cake and we're going to do this, and you don't have to do homework, just it's going to be fun. And then we're going to do spells. It's just going to be really fun. And then Sally's like, you will do homework. There will not be cake. You will just, like she's telling them, and there will be no spells.
She's more like the traditional kind of like mom, parent, like kind of, whereas like her aunts are very much like, let's like flouting the rules, just like, it doesn't really matter. You can learn stuff in different ways. Yeah. And so I think maybe finding a happy medium between that, is something probably helpful that I think they probably learn about. Definitely Sally, maybe Jillian too, to an extent. She's a little bit of a different story, but yeah. And I think there's a lot of grief that Sally's expressing. She's angry, but then there's also like a reconnection with her sister when her sister Jillian comes back, and she like, they go under the blanket, and she's just like, I was so happy. They kind of like bond, they talk for hours, and there's like, hugging, some of the healing in that.
Yeah. And it is like they had this huge separation, because Jillian, it sounds like she never met her nieces until this moment. Both Jillian and Sally were so psychically connected, because they had like that blood bond, which they already had a blood bond because they're sisters. But when they cut their hands, and then they clasp them over, and then they're just, so then they can almost like sense each other. But so they knew when each other was needing each other, there was an emergency.
Yeah, like there was that when Jillian was about to be really possibly like killed or harmed by that abusive boyfriend. Like Sally is like, oh my God, like she knew she was in trouble when she felt it, that like intuitive connection, which I think all these elements point to some of the magical, quote unquote, magical elements that I think people have, that like intuition and connection is kind of magical if you think about it. It's kind of not really like something you can explain, but it's there. And it is, some people say it's like, we don't have five senses, that like intuition and dreams and, memories of particular, events are also senses for people, like kind of intuitive or in tune with that. And I think that's part of the practical magic, that this is titled after, is in seeing that.
Yeah. And I wonder if the title, I wonder if it was a play on, practical magic, because it's like, it's everywhere. It's not just, we're not just doing the cauldron and doing all this. It's, it's like every day. It's very practical.
Yeah. Like there's things like in the connections with your family, the intuition, like growing, like they have like all these herbs, and they're like, make sure you have that there's that famous ending quote that I'm going to butcher. That's like, make sure you plant rosemary by your garden, I'm sorry, I can't remember what.
Yeah, no, I remember what you said. Yeah, it's like rosemary and lavender, something basil. It was a few other things. I was like, that makes sense.
Yeah, but it's really good advice. I mean, it's like that's something you could do in your garden to be like, okay, and these are things that like I think our ancestors have been doing for a long time, before we kind of knew about modern medicine and things like that. There was herbs and there was like an understanding of like, oh, this brings luck because, there's some practical form of it, but maybe we didn't know. And to keep that in your life, and to keep that, like to treasure it, I think. So I think absolutely. It is like an everyday magic. It's not just like, the magic, like boiling bones or whatever, and kind of coming up with spells. But although there is like some of that in there just for.
But it is also the magic of, it's interesting too, that it's like, 3 generations of sisters. That the movie is basically based on, and how they're able to be so different and be so alike and just learn from each other. And there comes a point like when everything's going bad and the aunts are like, okay, we're leaving. We're out of here. You now need to figure this out. And you did this, this crazy stuff. But they knew that, the young girls are going to be safe. Like their young nieces, but they knew they couldn't help Sally and Jillian by staying there. So I thought that was actually like they needed to let them grow up and figure this out themselves, even though they probably had the tools because they're older witches and they've known what to do. They probably knew how to help whatever is happening with like the boyfriend that his spirit was coming back, trying to haunt them or whatever.
Yeah. I think that was kind of like a letting go, right? Of like saying like, sometimes there's things you have to figure out on your own. We know that you're capable of it, but we can't caretake and enable that sort of thing.
Right.
I know I'm using very therapy terms, but yeah, for sure. I think that's a good point, to kind of look at that to say like, sometimes you have to kind of step out of people's lives and they have to figure it out. But you're not doing that as a form of any type of like hatred or maliciousness, but as a form of love. And that can be really powerful because they end up getting help from the phone tree system.
Like from
PTA system.
The PTA, with all these women who are so judgmental and mean to Sally for her whole life, because these are all the young girls that she grew up with that now are moms in the town who were still very judgmental
and like
of her.
Here they are. They're like
very excited. Like,
like kind of like. It's like something different for them. They're, this is like magic, but then they kind of see that like, Sally's not that much different and needs some help and is vulnerable and they're there for her.
Yeah. And then they see too, because one is like Sally's like, oh, I'm shocked you're here. She's like, well, I always wanted to see the inside of your house. But then you could tell,
like everyone's always been curious.
But then you could tell like they at first like, this is really scary. Are we supposed to do this? What do we do? And then they're getting really into it. And then you could see like all of a sudden something changes in all the women's way they're reacting when you could see how upset Sally is that Jillian's dying or whatever's happening with, whatever's happening to her. It's just really scary for her. You could see the compassion with them all while they're doing this.
Yeah. And I think that's, that's a good connection point that people can have and like have that kind of, I guess, like, connect like friendships, like sisterhood friendships, and kind of seeing that and seeing them as people as opposed to just like, you're a witch or whatever kind of thing they kind of saying at the beginning, and so they were able to see that humanity and also catch a glimpse into them to say like, they're not that different. I mean, they may do things a little bit differently, but they still have a lot of the same things that we understand, right?
Yeah.
Because then there's also the element of Jillian, with this, I don't know, demon guy or whatever, that he's abusive, but she, puts a spell on him to, kind of say like, okay, you're going to be obsessed with me. You don't want anyone else. And then he kind of is just like crazy and comes after her, attacks her. So she has to kill him. And her sister comes and hell, that's the time when she realizes that she's in trouble.
Yeah.
And then, he comes back and is just like trying to attack and take over her psychically, basically, which
Mm-hmm.
is so symbolic of like, that abuse, like
Abuser.
how it just
Yeah.
kind of keeps, kind of even after they're gone, like there's still so much psychically that you'd have to deal with, or if they
Yeah.
just keep coming back, like,
Yeah. And
it's,
breaking the cycle, it's, because it's like a
yeah,
push pull too. Like trying,
yeah,
being able to leave and then feeling, like how is your family going to react? And just, like, do you have the support? Because a lot of times people
right.
feel like they don't have any support when they're in an abusive relationship too. So that's also very symbolic of the phone tree and everybody around
Yeah,
her gathering around her to protect her and help her and save her from this man who is still abusing her even after he's dead.
right. And
Yeah.
her sister like rushed to help her with a dead body, like,
Mm-hmm.
and didn't say like, "Oh, you shouldn't have been doing this," or like, kind of judge her in that way. Instead, she just helped her, and said
Mm-hmm.
like, "Okay, this is what we need to do." And I mean, obviously, like realistically, there's a lot of things about that. We're not saying like that's the best way to handle things,
Yes.
but
Yes. Yeah. We're not condoning this.
no,
This made up movie that we're talking about.
yeah, no, yeah, I mean, I think it's just to say that she, Sally was supportive of her, like
Yeah.
she had that love for her
Yeah. She
that
she
she couldn't take
realized.
away.
Yeah. She realized that her sister needed her. And it's
Yeah,
also a different role too, because Jillian seems like she probably was the one that would be like, oh yeah, let's do this. I'm out for anything. Fun sister that would probably always try to protect Sally growing up. And so now Sally had the chance to do that for her.
yeah, and kind of make sure that she was okay, and yeah, I think that's like shows that sisterly bond, and like you said, the generations of it,
Mm.
and also I think the connections between each one, and then wondering what Sally's daughters, what they're going to
Okay.
end up with, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like who are they going to be? And knowing that it doesn't have to be something that's forced upon them. They don't have to be, mixing up margaritas at night, or whatever, or tequila, yeah, margaritas, and which is like cool, probably, if they do, but they don't have to be doing that every night, and they
Hmm.
also don't have to be like rejecting all of these magical things that you can find with people and connections around you,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. So they could still
definitely
have,
just like that.
their witchiness and they could be open to their intuition and, and be open to love, because now that's also was revealed in the movie. That is very old. So don't get mad at us about all these spoilers, but the spell is broken. And then Sally's able to have love. And now everybody's able to have love and not fear that beetle is going to come chirping and then whoever you love is going to die.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, it's really maybe kind of like freeing you from a mental block or a generational trauma, or a trauma that's been passed down, to kind of say, okay, I can move forward in this grief. I can know that grief happens, that this is not something that's going to, follow me for the rest of my life. And Sally does end up finding another good dude at the end, right?
Hmm.
She's, and it feels kind of like safe because she
Yeah.
knows that it's no longer a threat, and so she can move on. And, there's kind of that element where I think I had a hard time understanding when I watched this when I was, when it first came out. I think I was like a teenager. Yeah, I was a teenager. And I think just kind of recognizing that, like, I couldn't, like, I guess, mix together the literal elements and the
Hmm.
symbolic elements. And it just kind of bothered me because I was like, well, how come the Beatles not going to come out? Like, for this, that's not like, I just didn't really get,
Yeah.
you kind of have to understand that. Like, I was just very literal about it, I think. And I was like, well, that's weird. Like, are they witches, or is this just like, I didn't realize that like that was the whole point of it, So yeah, that took me a while, but I really did enjoy it. Like, when I watched it as like, probably in like my 20s or something, I was like, oh, okay, I get this. I see this in a whole different light,
Hmm.
and
Yeah, it is. It's interesting how you watch it differently because I know when I first I've seen it not 1,000 times, but I've probably seen it like 4 or 5 times. And I know the first couple times I saw it, I was like, oh, this is really weird and spooky and creepy with the frogs and the guy and, but then I used to always think Jillian was like really cool and, because she's so pretty and just seems like free and everything. And rewatching it, like I watched it last night before our show today, that Jillian just kind of annoyed me. I felt like she was very selfish and
Yeah.
self-absorbed and didn't really listen to Sally's needs or anyone else's. And I know when I've watched it before, I was like, ugh, Sally's such a dud. So boring. Just so like just milquetoast type of stuff. But now when I rewatched it, I was like, wow, I really understand Sally. Maybe I'm dull and boring now. But I really thought that. I was like, she makes sense. Like this, she just wants to fit in and she just wants to be happy. And yeah, she could light the candles with her finger and she could do the different things, but she sees, she's still mourning her mom and dad, like as a little kid and as a teen and everything. And she's just seeing that magic is what caused her dad to die. And then because of magic, her mom died of a broken heart. And if she doesn't do magic, then maybe that wouldn't happen to her or something, so she just kind of
she's living in response to that trauma, going to the opposite end.
Yeah, so
which is so relatable. Like I agree with you. I can relate more because you see that she's very scared. She's very traumatized by that, and she's like trying. And I really relate to Sally. I was very much like a person who, if I saw family members when I was younger doing stuff, I was like, I'm going to stay so far away from that. It will not even be a part of my life.
Yeah.
And I would reject a lot of things. Like I did react that way because I was like, I can't do that. I can't do that because I know that this causes pain. Like I could see it. And
that's very smart. That's very smart of you because a lot of people don't do that. A lot of people who see family members or other people doing dangerous things or stupid things, they just were like, okay, that's bad, but it won't be bad for me. But for you to say, you know what, I'm just going to stay far away from it. That's probably difficult, but it's also very brave and very smart.
I think it was very self-preserving. It also comes with its own issues because then you don't explore a lot of these things near that, right? And I think that's kind of what Sally experienced is she was like, well, now that she decided to, with the spell, the help of her aunt's spell, like, get married and have kids. And I think she felt like, oh, this was a bad idea after. And like, why did I do this? Like, why was this here just for it to be taken away? But, realizing that those elements in life are going to happen. It is a tragedy. It is something that is awful, but that is something that we all face a risk of happening on a daily basis.
Yeah. We all can't lock ourselves in our room or in our house on an island with just, with our aunts who, or just even be like, all right, I'm going to die alone with my sister. And that's my plan. So I can't really make any other plans in between.
Right. Yeah. Like I can't keep myself safe by locking myself in a cage. And I think that's kind of what she was, feeling like would be safe for her. She was so scared of that she just kind of went the opposite spectrum. But yeah, like we're talking about, she comes to Saturn. She kind of realizes like, wait, maybe this is a lot of my own mental blocks. I can take some of this in. I can rework this and I can, I can have some of these traditions with my family. And it doesn't mean that it's all bad, but I can also keep some of these things that I feel like keep me safe too. Like maybe some, routines for homework for my kids, kind of thing. And maybe they don't have chocolate breakfast. Like, like, but maybe sometimes, right. Yeah. So I think it's kind of really like, looking at when kids are traumatized. And then Jillian, on the other hand, was kind of just like, I'm just going to like have no boundaries and just go out loud and just see what happens. And Sally kind of rescues her,
Yeah. And I think Jillian was doing the opposite. So where Sally was trying to protect and preserve herself by not experiencing, Jillian thought, well, I will not have any deep connection with anybody if I'm just partying and being free and being just moving around all the time because then I won't hurt or I won't lose.
Yeah. It's really interesting because that does apply in family dynamics, how like siblings and just how different family members will respond differently to trauma, to hurt, to taking in, understanding your family, to figuring out who you are. And I think there's so many elements in that demonstrated in Sally and Jillian. And of course, in the aunts and the, for the future, Sally's kids too. But yeah, some, I think it very much says you can have reactions to trauma, but you always have to come to a head with it. You have to go through it. You can't go around it with these other ways, and
it's going to find its way back if you just kind of avoid it instead of figuring that path to it or just having that uncomfortable feeling for a little bit.
Yeah, maybe that was demonstrated. I don't know, maybe I'm just imagining this, or maybe this is obvious, that maybe that was demonstrated with the beetle that killed, that like it wasn't dealt with, like the mother, Jillian and Sally's mother, didn't like just died of a broken heart. And then Sally really took it in and like was like, I'm not going to do this. Or if I do this, like, no, it just can't happen. Like it kind of wasn't
Right.
really processed, all of that. So maybe that's like the beetle coming back. Like it's still there. That element's still there.
Yeah.
Like that fear of like, you know, can I love? Can I put myself out there? Vulnerability kind of thing.
Mhm.
And Jillian was like, I'm gonna appear to be vulnerable, but I'm really just kind of putting myself out there in a way that's not really putting myself out there. Like,
Yeah.
that's,
She's
you know,
putting
just
herself
being
out there. Yeah. She's putting herself out there, but she knows that she's never putting herself out there for love. So she's never
Yeah.
really going to lose. It's going to be on her terms.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And so that kind of, the beetle is maybe that kind of reminder. Maybe that's why there was like no fear of the beetle coming back at the end, because maybe Sally had processed that.
Well, yeah. Well, they also said in the movie, they believe that the spell was broken because of all the women coming together at the very end. And there's like that big spark of light or whatever happened. And it's almost like they all felt happiness, all these cranky women and, you know, everyone else. And like, you know, the spell was broken and he was gone and they dusted him off. They brushed him up, brushed him away. And then it was like Sally was free to love. And I guess that future generations are now. So now that generational curse is gone.
Yeah, I think that's like she found the connection in other people and was able
Yeah.
to say, I can be open, I can ask for help,
Yeah.
and it's okay. You
And
know,
how
it's good.
vulnerable asking for help from a bunch of women who bullied you your whole life.
Yeah, and in the like a PTA phone tree, that's got to be the
Ugh.
most intimidating thing in the world. Like, I
Yeah.
don't know. To me, that sounds
Yeah, that sounds
intimidating.
awful. That sounds like I don't think I'd want to do that.
Yeah, it's yeah. But yeah, so there's just so many great scenes in this, right? There's like the cool, like the house, it's like the New Englandy vibes, the witches, the garden, you know, the herbs that they have, the spells they cook up. Of course, that a classic like tequila scene, the margarita,
Yeah.
the, you know, lime and the coconut kind
I'm
of
in the
dancing.
coconut. Yeah.
Yeah, like they kind of, you know, have fun and, you know, and just, you know, a lot of it is like a fun movie. It's a very like Halloweenish movie, kind of
Mhm.
spooky vibes, witchy vibes. And yeah, so it's just but it's also got these very, I think, intertwined family dynamics, mental
Yep.
health themes in there that are really important.
Yeah, a lot too. What's interesting about this movie too, because it's not just about like one family member dynamic. It's, you know, goes back multiple generations. So they're still like, because you hear Jillian and Sally talk like how they still are angry with their mother who's passed.
Yeah.
Then they have these two aunts who seem nothing but love. And so they're, you know, they really probably shown them both what love is and what family relationship. And these two sisters are so connected, but they're also so different. And they've worked through they seem like they've had to work through their stuff throughout their life. And it's just interesting how everyone processes grief and everything differently together.
Yeah, but I think the support and the connection is really key there. You know, it's which is such a theme that we always deal with a lot with mental health, you know, feeling safe and connected. Those are big kind of foundational
Yeah.
tenets that
Yeah, definitely.
clients need, that a lot, that everyone needs, you know,
Yeah.
people need for mental health. And
Yeah.
just for being human, right? But yeah, and I found the quote. Okay, so it is that quote that you all will recognize this. I just had to, it was just kind of, you know, driving me batty. But so it says, there are some things I know for certain. Always throw spilled salt over your left shoulder. Keep rosemary by your garden gate. Plant lavender for luck and fall in love wherever you can or whenever you can. So it's kind of just like, that's the practical magic of like,
Yeah.
you know, of life, is like working through some of those things. It kind of sums it up. So
Yeah.
I just thought that was a
So
good
you
way
have
to
some
kind
good
of
luck,
end up.
some
I
health,
think
you know, there's different things in that. Yeah.
yeah. And, you know, kind of like that hope and, you know, keeping yourself open for love in many different forms, not just romantic love, but friendship, family, things like that.
Animals. Yeah.
Animals. Yeah, of course. Yeah, definitely. But yeah, so anything else that you wanted to add?
No, I think we
themes or
covered
anything?
most of I feel like we covered most of the themes. Yeah, it's a good movie. It definitely was different rewatching. And, you know, we say this all the time. Tanya and I like new stuff, but we also really like old stuff. So we're going to be little yin yang, whatever. It's going to be, you never know what you'll get.
back and
But
forth.
but
seesaw.
it is nice. I like going back watching some of these movies because I do have a different perspective. Like as an adult, sometimes I still am cheering for the same character. Like but then sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, it totally flopped. Totally switched.
Right. Yeah. Like I don't see why I like that person, or like maybe I've
Yeah.
just grown past that, or you don't identify that
Yeah.
person anymore. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So we hope you enjoyed this discussion of practical magic. Let us know if you have any favorites, spooky season or otherwise, or just in general, anything. We always love to hear any ideas that you have for us to discuss. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Wicked Psychotherapy. On Facebook, we are the Wicked Psychotherapists. Subscribe and follow us. Right.
Yeah, we have I think every week. You probably would have already heard a Halloween one by this week, but every week we're gonna have a fun Halloween episode coming out.
Yeah. It's gonna be fun. It's gonna be a nice October. And of course, as you know, we love it. And I do want to give a shout out on our Instagram to this coffee I discovered. It's Jim's. We don't have any affiliation with them. I'm just doing this because I love it. It's Jim's Organic Coffee. It was called a Witchy brew, and it's very dark. It's delicious. So I tried that. I got it from Whole Foods. Yummy. Give it a shot. And it's got Witchy brew in the title.
Yeah, why not? We like witches. So Tanya's going to be flying high, doing her therapy notes later.
Yep.
Lots of concentration.
Sure. Yeah. Lots of concentration, lots of gibberish. Yeah. But yeah. And don't forget, stay wicked.
And keep your mind well. Have a good week. Okay. Bye-bye.
All right, guys. See you next week.